And welcome to another edition of the Big Nick Energy Podcast. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts. I have a really special guest today. We're actually going to start doing a little season preview with all the Atlantic teams at the very least, starting first and foremost with the team that I live closest to in Connecticut. But the person I'm talking to does not live anywhere near Boston, Massachusetts. Part of the Boston Celtics podcast, First to the Floor, part of the CLNS Media family at CLNS Media, which hosts over 50 Boston sports podcasts. Ben Vallis out of Australia. Ben, how are you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Much appreciated for you coming on. And just for everyone to know our actual time zone difference, it is currently 11:25 p.m. Sunday night. And what time is it by you?
It's 1:25 p.m. Monday afternoon, I guess. Yeah.
The world is a crazy place. I have a crazy thing that a dude I work with thought of as a concept. Let me run it by you real quick.
Sure.
I don't know. It's a full 24-hour cycle from the beginning of Japan all the way to the end of Hawaii, correct? It's basically 24 hours around the globe.
Thereabouts, yeah.
What if we just had the same time everywhere instead of doing time zones? And then we would just all know what time it is at all times. And then you still adjust based on, like, for you, maybe you go to, like, your kids would go to school from like 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. And my kids would go to school like 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. But like we all have the same time instead of doing time zones. What do you think of the idea? Have you ever thought of it?
I haven't thought of it until now. It's piqued my interest. But who gets prioritized in terms of like who gets to keep the current time frame? Because I feel
think
like
we
that
still go with the
World
English
War III.
meridian, right? Just go with what they named the center and go from there. That part of England, Ireland, Africa, like those Western Africa, you get the noon, and we all go off you.
I'm all for simplification. I hate daylight savings, and that's just a 1 hour shift. So give me a universal time. I'll take it.
Dude, I mean, we don't all do farming anymore. That's not how we live. We don't need to know when the sun goes up. It's all good.
We all stay inside on Zoom anyway.
Exactly. Ben, first off, how did you become a Boston Celtics? How did you become a Boston Celtics fan living in Australia? And then how did you get to doing a podcast?
I'll try and give you the short version. I grew up in Thailand for a few years. I went to an American school, lived in an American compound, came home after 3 years with an American accent. I was that ensconced in the American life and got into trading NBA basketball cards while I was over there. And Larry Bird, he looked like one of my dad's, my dad played touch rugby when I was a kid. He looked like just one of those guys you'd see down at the club on the central coast of Australia with like a blonde mullet holding a beer after a couple of games of footy. So that kind of took to me a little bit. I had a few friends who were from Boston who kind of talked me into it, which was no easy feat given it was the 90s. The Celtics were not, an easy lure for a new
They were in a lull for sure.
Exactly. So that's the short version of how I became a fan. And then, played basketball as a kid. So it was an easy sell for me. Getting into podcasting, it just came from being a fan and being isolated as a fan in this part of the world and not having an outlet as far as people to talk specifically about the Celtics too. So almost 6 years ago now, we started the podcast in this attic here in my house in Sydney. And we've been doing it ever since. We brought on more people as we've moved along. And about a year ago, we got picked up by Celtics Blog, which was a nice nod to what we'd been doing to sort of be starting to get paid, somewhat professionally for doing this.
Right.
And then further down the road, we got picked up by CLNS. Again, that's the short version. But it's nice. It's validating to start something as a hobby and have it sort of picked up and be brought, on board and onto a platform like CLNS who have so many great podcasts.
That means you have three things going for you. First off, it's knowledge. Second off, it's your tone of voice. And honestly, as an American, anytime we hear any accent that's not American, because we all hate our own, I think like I sound like a nasally piece of crap. So hearing your voice, majestic. And third is just timing and desire. It's just the matter of doing it 1 day, 2 days a week, which honestly is the hardest part, I feel like.
Yeah, well, we care about it a lot, and we'd be doing it even if nobody listened. And like for the first 3 years, that's what we were doing, admittedly. But what about yourself? Like, how did you? I don't want to like get you to repeat yourself to your listener base there, but how did you get into podcasting about the Knicks?
So COVID happened, and I quit my job where I was doing door to door, and it was mentally debilitating to say the least. To do door to door sales and marketing, even when there wasn't a pandemic going, not the easiest. So I quit, and then it was February 2021. And the dude's name who I have on here, Vin, him and his buddy Ange were already running Big Nick Energy, but like just like selling clothing, market, like that type of stuff. And they ran a Twitter account. And Ben was like, I have this friend that knows a lot about sports and is like overly passionate about it. Even though basketball isn't my first love, it's honestly football. Like the Jets are first. I don't know if the thing's on there. Jets are first, and then it goes
Oh, there you
Knicks
go.
second. But I mean, I actually there's more basketball than football. Obviously, I watch way more Knick games. I get to dissect the game more. I enjoyed playing basketball more than football growing up as a kid, and I just went along with it. And then since February 2021, just been doing it more or less at least every other week since then. So
Nice.
here we are.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. That's great.
So I want to get into the questions. This is for everyone just to know real quick. This is going to be like Boston Celtics-esque centric. But I'm going to round everything about the Knicks and the rivalry, what's coming up for this upcoming year. Ben, first off, the biggest move you guys made in the offseason, above and beyond. Marcus Smart ends up on the Memphis Grizzlies. You have Kristaps Porzingis, and the Wizards are tanking. Doesn't affect them at all. But for you guys to lose Marcus Smart, who is known as your heart and soul of your team, specifically defensively, for the past 7, 8, 9 years, how much are you going to miss cheering for Marcus Smart, the player, and how much do you think, or as a player, and then how much do you think the Celtics are going to miss him as a teammate?
I'm going to miss Marcus Smart a lot. He's like the reason our podcast is called First to the Floor. Like he's the embodiment of that diving on the floor, to the betterment of our team and to the detriment of other teams. We saw him accidentally, I'll maintain, it was accidentally injuring Steph Curry last season, doing just that, diving to the floor. But the embodiment of that sort of defensive tenacity is one of the reasons that I fell in love with the Celtics in the first place. So for Marcus Smart to be shipped out, it's quite devastating for the fan base, particularly when you're not always contending for a championship, to find something to get your hooks into as far as like reasons to love the team. Marcus Smart is the embodiment for that for fans. So just from a fan perspective, it's a huge loss. From a team perspective, it's Brad Stevens and co gambling on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown being able to find their voice and creating a space for them to find their leadership voice. Marcus Smart, notably a very vocal person on and off the court, potentially to the detriment and getting in the way of that of the Jays. So that they're gambling on the Jays being able to step into that leadership role with Marcus Smart going out the door. And then in addition, like getting Kristaps Porzingis, like please God, will he stay healthy? And 2 first-round draft picks for Marcus Smart, first of all, is just huge value. But then
100%.
we've essentially formulated a big 3. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, whether you think it's a legitimate big 3 in Porzingis and the Jays, but that's what they've got as a result of shipping Smart out. So if Smart stays healthy, it's a worthwhile gamble.
So Kristaps Porzingis has a very interesting reputation at this point within New York and the New York Knicks fan base and media. Obviously, like he was so thrilling. Being the 4th overall pick, like we wanted him to be great. We obviously wanted the number 1 overall pick, and we never got it any year than the rest of the year he was going out. But like the first time he did a putback dunk, and it was in the preseason, it was against the Wizards. He gets a putback dunk, just like this 7'2" guy gliding through the air from what seemed like the foul line. And that moment immediately resonated with the fan base. Also, what really helped out, and this is an unfortunate thing about human society, the first time he talked on camera, like when he got drafted, he sounded like an American. And for better or for worse, it's like you hear someone from Latvia, you're like assuming Eastern European like accent, like English isn't his first language. This dude was just bred to be in the NBA. He knew English at a young age. You could have literally told me he was from like Wyoming. I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. Like he just sounded like he was just from here. You know what I mean? So it was very easy for him to be sold onto us as a fan base. You are going to run into, you already kind of are with the plantar fasciitis, his tantalization and the theory that is Kristaps Porzingis. Now that you're obviously my rival, like now that Kristaps is on an immediate rival, when he was on the Mavericks, I was still rooting for him, even though his brothers kind of like made him want to leave, and the Phil Jackson thing, like it wasn't the best ever. Even when he was on the Wizards and back in the Eastern Conference, I don't root against Kristaps, you know? Like he brought some joy to a time when our team was bad, like the end of the Melo era, 2016, 2017, 2018. And then we literally had back-to-back years under 23 wins. Didn't get the number 1 overall pick either year. We didn't get Zion Williamson. There's no Ja Morant. Like we have RJ Barrett. Our best point guard for half a year was Bron Baker and then Alonzo Trier. We had Frank Ntilikina. We just kept missing and missing. And Kristaps was the only guy that actually, like before Barrett anyway, seemed like a real hit. And then between the injuries and his brother, he left and he wasn't there. And even when he was on the Wizards, like, I'm not rooting against the guy, but you never see him play more than 60 games in a season. A lot of times you don't even see him play 45 games in a season. And when the couple times he was supposed to be in the playoffs, he didn't play all the playoff games. I think it's only been once in the past 7 years he was supposed to be. So it's like, what are you really going to get out of the Kristaps Porzingis experience? And for Marcus Smart diving on the floor, his health and well-being has never been really in question. He's had one major injury in the past 7 years. Like, Kristaps has a major injury every other year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just something you run into a lot.
Marcus Smart, very many self-inflicted injuries, including but not limited to punching a glass picture frame in the Lakers hallway or something like that. So that's one of the frustrations that comes with Marcus, that he's quite self-destructive, where I think Kristaps Porzingis, for lack of a better term, is a little bit more flimsy, a little bit more of a snowflake. Last year, though, he did have his best season ever. He did play 65 games, and you could argue that
he would have qualified for MVP and all NBA and all that stuff. First time since a rookie year.
Yeah, that's right. And also, if the Wizards were in any form of contention, that he could have stretched himself to play more games, but obviously there was no reason to devalue him potentially by risking an injury there.
Right, 100%. Yeah, the last time he played 65, so I have it in front of me. It's been in reverse order: 65 last year, like you said, 17, 51, 43. No, that's actually one thing. 51, 43, 57, didn't play ACL, 48, first year, 72, 65. So he would have only qualified for the new standards for all NBA 3 out of the 8 years he's been in the league. It's asking for a lot. It's asking for a lot. He is really good when he's out there. Is he going to be out there? The one thing you guys definitely have going for you, which is the very thankful thing, my thing is just sliding over. It's like it's just being walked away by ants. You guys do still have Robert Williams and Al Horford playing the 5 in this scenario. It's not like Kristaps is going to be your starting 5. He's not going to have to bang inside down low nearly as much. But Al Horford's also going into his age 39 year. And Robert Williams is another guy. Can he play 30 games in a row? So your bigs as a whole, I mean, unless you want to rely on Sam Hauser way more than you are before, you're kind of running into something where I think you're going to see injuries are more likely than not piling up. And we all say as fans, as media, you never want to assume injuries. But when the proof's in the pudding, if a guy misses on average 50 to 60% of games available, and then 3 guys miss a combined 30% of games available, you have to assume at least one of them is going to be out more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we do have a lot of depth, a lot of top end depth. And this is going back to my, claim that it's a big 3, and that this will be Zinger's first time as not a top 2 player on the team. He's easily, I think, the 3rd best behind Tatum and Brown, at least as far as the hierarchy of this Celtics team. And then looking at the big man depth individually, sure, they have their risks, and it keeps me up at night, believe me. But between the 3 of them, a minutes load, a workload share and distribution, you would hope that they can keep themselves out of trouble. Yes, they are going to miss time due to injury. We do have Luke Cornett. We do have O'Shea Brissett, who can come in and do spot minutes, in times where guys need to take games off, and particularly guys like Horford going into his age 37 season, although it does feel like age 39 at times.
Only 37? I swear to God, it was 39. He's been in the league like 17 years, dude. It's unbelievable.
So there are redundancies, I suppose, is my point, or at least that's what I'm telling myself as I try and fall asleep every night.
Hey, man, I mean, you guys still have the best odds to make the playoffs. You have the best odds to have the number 1 seed in the East, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But so before we get off the moves you guys made, the one guy you did end up drafting that you actually kept on the team, who I really liked out of Arkansas last year, Jordan Walsh. He's 6'7", 7'2" wingspan. Anyone that listens to me knows my favorite player in the NBA is OG Anunoby. And it's because of the wingspan. It's because of the defensive versatility and being one of the best at covering 1 through 5. Can't cover Embiid, Jokic, or Giannis, but you can cover basically everyone else from Fred VanVleet all the way to Kevin Durant. So, I mean, there's a thing to being 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan. He projects at his peak a really, really good 3-and-D player. Couple things going in. Obviously, he's a second-round pick. Part of that's because the 3 part, he had a pregnancy to foul quite a bit. And the D part, he only shot 27 or 26% from 3 last year for Arkansas. So what do you expect out of the one guy, Jordan Walsh, that you guys did end up keeping draft-wise? Will he be in the rotation this year, or kind of like the 12 through 15 trying to work his way through playing time?
Honestly, I don't expect a lot from Jordan Walsh. We call him Walshy on our podcast, which is like an Aussie tip of the cap, old
Love
mate
that.
Walshy. He, 38th pick. He didn't see a lot of usage in Arkansas there in college. The looks that he will get when he does, or if he does get playing time for the Celtics, you have to imagine they're going to be a much more wide open looks given the talent that he'll be sharing the court with, most notably the Jays and Porzingis. But I honestly expect to see him playing for the main Celtics predominantly compared to or as opposed to the Boston Celtics. He will get playing time because I think to some degree we're going to want to see what we have, and then we're going to want to see what the crossover was from his relatively successful summer league to how that translates to the NBA. And, we know that he's a great individual defender. We know he has that ability, but can he play into an NBA defense, schematically speaking, from a team scheme defense perspective? We've seen great shooters come into the NBA who can't convert or can't throw a ball into the ocean once they get onto the NBA court. We've seen a similar things with, hyped 3-and-D players who just can't, that skill set doesn't transfer to the NBA. So initially, I think we'll give him a look. I think at some point we'll get two things a lot more serious about winning and finishing with that, top 1 or 2 seed. And therefore his playing time will be diminished. And then developmentally, we're going to want to see him have more playing time. And that's when we'll ship him up to Maine there for some time with the Maine Celtics.
I mean, if this works in the best case ideal scenario, the way you do it is you do it like the Denver Nuggets did last year, where you have the 1 seed locked up for like 12 games left. And then your younger players get to play the last 10 games of the season. And that's
Absolutely.
why we always see numbers where it's like, oh my God, what's his name on the Nets? He just put up 48 points back to back. Cam Thomas. Yeah, he played a bunch against the G Leaguers. Like, what would you expect? It's the end of the season. That would be best case scenario for you guys with him, honestly. To talk about him in the deal specifically, not necessarily Jordan Walsh, but like, so you guys kept trading back in the draft when it was happening. You went from the couple first. You got like, 5 seconds out of like all the deals you ended up making, 4 or 5, give or take?
Yeah, we traded back a bunch of times. I had to write it down. I had it in my notes here. Here we go. So it's tough to commit to memory. So we traded the 25th pick for pick 31 and 2 future seconds. Then we traded the 31st pick for pick 34 and 39. We were live streaming throughout this the whole time. It was completely exhilarating.
I'm going to keep track where you're at, so for the camera to know. So you're at 4 right now.
Then we traded pick 34 for pick 38 and a future second. Then we traded pick 39 for a future second and ended up, so ultimately, all in all, ended up acquiring 5 second-round picks. And we used that 38th pick on Jordan Walsh, who prior to all of that, before we had even traded Marcus Smart and the 35th pick for Porzingis, we did a pre-draft show about who we'd like at that 35th pick spot. And Jordan Walsh was right up there on all of our projections. So it was a whirlwind to get where we got to, but ultimately we kind of ended up where we expected to as far as how that draft ended up in a vacuum.
Once you guys traded back from 24th all the way back to like having the 5, when you were originally in the mid-20s, was there anyone outside of Jordan Walsh that you were hoping to get that you like might like regret in the past in the future?
Maybe. I mean, we were looking at that 3-and-D sort of 6'9", long dimensions, 3-and-D wing type person. Olivier Maxence Prosper. I might be mispronouncing that. It's been a while since the draft. He went to the Mavs at 24. And then immediately after that, we did all those trades to get back to 38 and Walshy there. So the rumors were that Brad Stevens and the Celtics and co were looking at Maxence Prosper. He got taken off the board, and then we saw that trade tornado coming out of that. So that's probably the one guy that I hope we don't regret missing on. He went before we had a shot at him, so ultimately it's out of our control. But that's the name that was floating around at the time.
Another guy that's projected to be a 3-and-D guy. So I'm really wondering if any of these guys are going to actually get, because the whole part of the 3-and-D, I feel like the defense, when you're projected to do that, it translates a little better. It's the shooting 38+% from 23-foot NBA 3. That's always the harder part.
Totally. We'll see.
I want to ask one, outside of the guys that you got player wise, you got 2 great coaches to help Joe Mazzulla going into this upcoming year. And to use a football reference, I don't know if this works the same way in rugby, but you basically got an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator being Sam Cassell and the defensive coordinator being Charles Lee, who I've been big on for the past couple of years as like one of the next guys up to get a head coaching job. And now he's literally second in command to Joe Mazzulla. What is your take on getting both Sam Cassell and Charles Lee as assistants to help Joe after last year? And I know you don't want to hear or think about this, but absolute worst case scenario, is there any world that Joe Mazzulla gets fired mid-season and one of these guys would take over, and how does that happen?
So I'll try and address those questions chronologically. So the easy one is Sam Cassell, right? He has tenure with the Celtics. He won a title in '08 with that big three Boston Celtics with KG Pierce and Ray Allen. So we know him well, especially the older part of the Celtics fan base. Very happy to have him back. And Joe Mazzulla needs all the help he can get,
Yeah.
clearly. And I'll get to Charles Lee in a second, but Mazzulla, he's had his time of like, let's give him some slack because of the circumstances. That time has come. We've lived through it, and now it's behind us. And so
losing Strickland for you guys last year was even bigger than him getting promoted in itself. It was the terrible timing that Strickland got hired to coach.
Was it Strickland or was it Mighty Mouse? Whose name I'm forgetting at the moment. It wasn't Strickland. It was why am I forgetting his name? I'm gonna have to Google Mighty Mouse Raptors here to get his name. Damon Stoudemire. It was Damon Stoudemire.
Oh, there we go. My bad. I meant
No, I mean, I've had clearly moved on already and forgotten his name. But yeah, we did lose Stoudemire, who clearly, and maybe even more clearly in hindsight, was a voice in the locker room. And whatever grip Joe Mazzulla had on the locker room up until that point, he seemed to lose that grip even further after Stoudemire got shipped out. So that was problematic. But look, his time of having some slack, some leniency has come and gone. And now the pressure is on. And between Charles Lee, who by all accounts is a bit of a coaching mastermind who has sort of been lurking in the shadows there previously in Milwaukee, and was called upon for his knowledge, particularly from a defensive schematic standpoint, oftentimes in his time in Milwaukee. Really excited. Anytime anyone mentions the term mastermind, and then we're acquiring someone like that to back up Joe Mazzulla, that's really exciting. So we've got two good coaching minds with tenure in the NBA behind Joe Mazzulla. So the pressure's on. And the worst case for Mazzulla is that if he doesn't perform, like he will get cut because it's winning time. The window is short, especially with the constraints with the new CBA.
Yeah.
If Mazzulla's not getting it done, yes, these guys are here to help him, but they're also here to take over or take the reins if it doesn't work out in Mazzulla's case.
Worst case scenario, if that did end up happening, it sounds like you would rather Cassell more because of the history, or would you rather Lee take over?
I think we're in a position to make the right call based on how those guys gel with the players and who's got the better voice and calls the most attention in the room at that time. We have that luxury at least of giving those guys a trial of who might take over. Cassell seems like the more assertive one, and Charles Lee seems like the one who can operate in the shadows a little more. So that might be how it goes, but we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, for your sake, for my sake, I hope it happens because that means you guys are doing bad. For your sake, I'm assuming you don't. So,
I mean, if it happens, it's because it needs to happen. So at that point, I'll be all for it as well.
That's fair. Honestly, he might get fired and you guys could be like 35-30 in this 5 seed and you still make the playoffs. So it wouldn't be the end of the world.
Yeah, that would suck. But
you mentioned O'Shea Brissett before to move on from the coaching. You mentioned you got O'Shea Brissett before, and I also mentioned Sam Hauser before. O'Shea Brissett only signed a 2-year deal. The second one's a team option. Really funny tidbit. They both averaged 16 minutes and 6 points per game last year as backup forwards and played, I think Brissett played 10 more games or 8 more games than Hauser. So they played almost the same amount and did the same stuff while they were out there. They're both going to be like playing after Tatum, obviously, after Kristaps, like end of the rotation, like 12 to 15 minute type of game guys. Who would you rather see out there more in situations like that? Assuming when Kristaps or if God forbid Tatum had to miss a few games, who would you expect to get more out of? Hauser because he's already been there for a little bit, or Brissett because he shows more defensively?
Definitely Sam Hauser, who is a spectacularly average defender. I say spectacularly because that has always exceeded our expectations. And Celtics fans have this knowledge of what we call the house trap, which is opposing teams. And I expect this to diminish somewhat going into this season with the scouting reports updated. But the house trap in that he seems like this slow-footed, white guy defender, right? And yet, and so teams will go at him, and then he stands up, he holds his own, like on almost every single possession. And that came as a really nice surprise to Celtics fans last year. So he can hold his own defensively, and then offensively, obviously an elite 3-point stroke. He can catch it on his shoelaces, bring it up in a heartbeat and let it fly and nail the shot from pretty much anywhere. And the spacing that he adds to a court, also occupied by guys like Tatum and Brown and now Porzingis, is invaluable. So for me, it's always going to be Hauser. Brissett, we did a pod earlier today, and I brandished him with the most likely to disappoint brush, the most likely to be the scapegoat, especially in lieu of Grant Williams, who sort of held that trophy or that mantle rather previously. We signed Brissett to a vet minimum, which should set the expectations accordingly. And yet I feel like people expect him to fill Grant Williams' shoes. That's not going to happen. And then based on those expectations, people are going to be disappointed in Brissett early on, is my take.
I mean, Brissett also is an average defender. He's a spectacularly average defender where he looks like he's in the right spot all the time. And then the guy kind of just gets by him somehow.
Yeah.
And he gets all of his points off of rebounds and putbacks and cuts for the most part. So it's the exact opposite for them to have basically the same numbers. Mm-hmm. Ben, before we get into the actual picks over under this year, and then the one game I wanted to play with you, we didn't talk about Derrick White or Malcolm Brogdon, who are both still major pieces going into this year. And from the projections of it, unless Peyton Pritchard passes White on the depth chart, he's projected to be your starting point guard now, which kind of insane because you guys have lost Smart and Derrick White was the two. You're going to have like Derrick White, Brown, Tatum. I'm assuming Kristaps at the 4 and then Williams at the 5 to be your starting lineup. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong with that?
Sounds right to me. No, it sounds right to me.
So Derrick White is going to be having the ball in his hand way more earlier on and later on in the game than he did prior. Are you ready? Do you think Derrick White is ready for the increased role that he hasn't seen since he was on San Antonio? Or do you think Brogdon's going to close a lot of these games being the one with actual point guard experience in tough times?
I think Derrick White needs to be ready. So hopefully he is freaking ready. I mean,
like Missoula, man.
Exactly. I mean, he certainly emerged as of the elite point guard pool, at least probably too generous a term, but of the good point guard pool of Marcus Smart, Derrick White and Malcolm Brogdon. Derrick White, I think, clearly emerged as the top echelon of that pool of point guards last season. So it's no surprise that he's sort of finished at the top of that pile when all has been said and done this offseason. So he's going to have to share, I think, primary playmaking duties with Jason Tatum, who has proven himself to be quite a good playmaker. So it's going to be, I think, between Tatum and Derrick White as far as initiating that offense. He has at times, Derrick White, proven himself to be a decent playmaker, but one thing he's always done better than Marcus Smart and Malcolm Brogdon is get to the rim and penetrate defenses and then open up opportunities for other players on the court. And that's where he's got a lot of obvious room to improve. And one would hope, he never really had that sort of opportunity to play that way in San Antonio with, a season and a half now with the Celtics and a full offseason to study tape. Hopefully he's well poised to play that way and generate those opportunities. He definitely has the capacity to. We've seen samples of it, just not for long stretches of time. He did when Marcus Smart went out, midway through last season in February. He won that Eastern Conference Player of the Week award. So he has had some recognition for being, for reaching his ceiling as a playmaker and as a point guard for the Celtics. So I have a lot of faith in Derrick White. I think Derrick White, of all things, is maybe the least of my concerns going into this season. I think he'll be fine.
How do I word this? How, in a percentage standpoint, how often do you think Derrick White is closing versus Malcolm Brogdon then? Is it like 70-30, 60-40?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it through the lens of like a death lineup, they might be both sharing the court as part of a closing lineup. I think it could be something like Derrick White, Malcolm Brogdon, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. Because if you think about they can play 5 out. Porzingis is a underrated, I think, starting to be properly rated pick and roll defender in drop. He's gotten a lot better at defending closeouts. So it's not like you're giving up too much defensively by benching Rob Williams in favor of Kristaps Porzingis in that role. And then you've got elite shooters. You've got multiple playmakers on the floor. I think for the most part, it's going to come down to both Brogdon and Derrick White, as well as those other 3 players to close lineups. I think that's going to be our death lineup closing games.
I worry for you guys to have to rebound with that lineup. That is putting a lot on Tatum and Brown and White to crash the boards because Kristaps, I mean, dude, I've watched Kristaps for years. He's great at the rebounds that you don't think he'll get, and the ones you just wanted to box out and get, it's not happening. So
I will say that Jason Tatum is a fantastic rebounder.
He is your best one. He's your best one when he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, and aside from Rob Williams, probably the best rebounder on the team. And I suppose the argument against that is like they're just going to have to make all of their shots.
Yeah,
and with that kind of elite shooting out there, maybe that's the case.
There's a chance. There is a chance. I love that. So to get into the actual over-unders and where the Celtics and Knicks both project, like I said before, the Celtics actually have the best odds to make the playoffs at minus 8,000. So not a worth bet. If you think their top 3 players are all going to get hurt and their coach is going to get fired to miss the playoffs, they're plus 1,800, which I think might take a bus crashing and half them having to break their legs or something catastrophic to happen to actually do. Their over-under is set at 54.5. Their next level win prop, which I like for both of these, if you were to really push for the Celtics to actually try their butts off to get the number 1 seed, and for the Knicks to both overachieve with Tom Thibodeau and now actually a fully complete roster, the Celtics at 60 plus wins is at plus 240. And then I wrote down for the rotation, if I'm wrong, I mean, again, you're the Celtics fan, I'm not. If I'm wrong about any of these, let me know. The rotation I wrote down they'll probably have is Derrick White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Porzingis, and Williams to start. Pritchard, Brogdon, the winner or the better of Brissett, Hauser, I'm assuming Hauser, and then Horford to make the 9-man lineup, and then Luke Cornett or Brissett as like the 10th, 11th guy coming off the bench, probably not playing every game. Anything wrong with the 10 I have?
No, so rotation wise, I think that's pretty much perfect. There will be injuries, unfortunately, as much as I hate to accept that throughout the season.
Life.
It's the case for every team. Yeah, it's part of life. Fortunately, we do have some depth at some of those positions, but to me, that's exactly as I would outline the rotation for the Celtics.
And then, so it's 54.5 right now. What is your floor and what is your ceiling for your team going into this year?
I think 50 games one is the floor, and that's when we're pretty well plagued by injuries to a lot of our top tier players throughout the season. And then as far as the ceiling, we won 57 games last season. I believe we're a better team. I believe that we're going in as a higher risk team given the investment in injury prone players like Porzingis. But the ceiling should be I think 60 wins if we stay healthy. Then sky is the limit and a championship is the expectation. So it's all based on health, as it is for top tier teams every year. Yeah. So if this team stays healthy, it's got to be up around 60, 62 games. I think that talented. And yes, I'm a biased Celtics fan. I would love to be talked off this ledge by someone who's a little bit more neutral towards the Celtics like yourself. But to me, 60 wins, 62 wins seems reasonable if they're healthy.
I would assume you guys probably get to 56, 58 again. I know you ended up with 57 last year in the 2 seed. Yes. I would probably keep it around there, or 1 seed. There's a 1 seed, right?
I think that's completely fair. Yeah, I mean, 60 being the ceiling, 50 being the floor, and anywhere in between being completely reasonable, depending on what happens with the health situation.
Just based on recent history, I have to assume both Williams and Porzingis are going to miss 30 games. It's almost impossible not to at this point,
Yeah, but I mean, even then, they're just pretty much the same team as last year, sans Marcus Smart, which isn't that bad. They had one of their best stretches of the year without Marcus Smart, missing Robert Williams and obviously not having Kristaps Porzingis. So, we can afford those stretches of time as long as the Jays are healthy. There's so much talent with the Jays. They're both all NBA players. If they're healthy, you're always in with a shot of winning games and going on long winning stretches. So that's going to suck when it does inevitably happen, but I'm not too worried about it.
Before we get into the Knicks, I'm sure you've obviously talked about this in your podcast ad nauseum, but Jaylen Brown signing the Supermax extension that could be up to a Supermax extension is by far the second biggest story to you guys getting Kristaps and getting rid of Smart in the offseason. So what was your immediate takeaway with Brown signing the extension? And in your heart of hearts, do you truly believe Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum do not overlap with skill set enough that they will win a title one day?
They do overlap with skill set. Absolutely. I do think that they are starting to trend and peel away from one another in different directions as they mature, which is good to see. And, they made the finals a couple of years ago, and they've made the Eastern Conference Finals almost every time they've played together since both of them were drafted onto the Celtics. So there's a picture of success there. So it's difficult to argue against that. I understand the premise of the question, but they have had continued success since they've been paired together. So I'm a fan of continued success. So it's hard for me to argue against that. As far as the contract for Jaylen Brown, it comes down to there was no alternative. Even if you let him walk, even if you let him go into unrestricted free agency, at that point, he's probably not going to offer what would then be the max that the Celtics could offer him, because other teams, at that point, we relinquish his bird rights and other teams can offer him the same amount of money. At that point, he's likely to wander and look elsewhere. So we had to take advantage of the moment in time where we could offer him, an undeniable and unrejectable amount of money, which I'm glad we did, because there's no alternative. It's not like we suddenly regain all of that cap space if we
Right.
let him walk away. It's not like we can go out and sign another max player in lieu of Jaylen Brown. It was essentially Jaylen Brown or nothing. So it's a huge hit to the cap sheet, especially with the constraints brought upon by this new CBA. But there's really no other alternative. So with all of that said, I'm happy that we've brought Jaylen Brown back on long term. And with how young both of them are, the Jays, I'm looking forward to seeing how they continue to mature and gel as two top tier players.
At the end of the day, the 13th best player does not grow on trees. If you have him, you kind of have to keep that guy and hope him and the fifth best player in the league like get to number one somehow sooner or
Yeah.
later.
And like for the Knicks fans listening, being like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I acknowledge it is far from a perfect situation. Like, it's not, it's difficult. And we spent all year in discourse about it, wondering whether or not it was the right way to go, whether or not we hoped he would make All NBA and even be eligible for that Supermax extension. Ultimately, him making All NBA meant that we could dangle that carrot and offer him more money and, incentivize him to come back and rejoin the Celtics. So, ultimately, we're happy with it. I mean, ask me again in 6 months, and I might have a completely different answer for you.
We still think he wants to come to New York, man, and that Boston is kind of a racist city that he doesn't want to be in. And that's just like a thing that New Yorkers think, whether it's at 100% true or not. So
Fair enough.
Then to get into the Knicks, I'm sure you guys have probably talked about like all Atlantic teams at some point or another, but just to go over real quick, our over-under is 44.5. The next level, 50 plus wins. The Celtics 60 plus is plus 240. I love the Knicks because it's 50 plus at plus 340. And if there's ever a roster that's like made for Tom Thibodeau to actually like use, these are the 9 players I'm using, no one can say crap to me, and these 9 are all really good at what they do. I think this is a team that can win 51 games, and plus 340 for 50 plus wins, I think is great value. To make the playoffs is minus 355, and to miss, which for you guys, it would take 3 or 4 injuries for you to miss the playoffs. So it would take a lot. For us, it might only take 1 or 2 to either Randall or Brunson. So misses plus 270 if you have faith in the Knicks messing it up somehow. Real quick, the acquisitions, anyone listening to this already knows, but just for your fodder and to get your take, signed DiVincenzo, 4-year, $50 million deal. Extended Josh Hart. He's going to be a Knick for the next 5 years, up to $94 million total, 71.5 guaranteed because the last year's a team option. We got rid of Obi Toppin for 2 low second round picks. So now we don't have any fans saying that they wish Obi Toppin would play over Julius Randle, which is still a crazy thing to ever have to really go through. And then our 9-man rotation, McBride and Sims will make it 11, but they won't play. They'll play less than Cornette probably will for you guys. Jalen Brunson, Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson is the starting 5. Quickly, DiVincenzo, Hart, Isaiah Hartenstein are the 4 off the bench, and then we're going to rotate Barrett, Randle, or Brunson to like constantly fill in the 5th with the bench to have a bench unit going. So I'll ask you as an unbiased Celtics fan, are the Knicks do you see a world where the Knicks don't get 45 wins this year, or am I just that blind with like rose-colored glasses?
No, I mean, I see that world. And similarly to like the Celtics hitting their floor, it comes down to health or a lack thereof. But, I really like the culture within the Knicks. I think they've got a lot of, to use a lot of cliche terms, like hard-nosed, gritty players. And Jalen Brunson in particular, he really exceeded my expectations as far as like taking on that marquee player role, that top 1 player role on the Knicks. Like I thought that Julius Randle might fight him for that a little bit, but unfortunately,
I think he did at the beginning.
Yeah, except he seems to, Julius Randle, sort of recede, out of the spotlight whenever the Knicks need him most. And I feel for Knicks fans because I know how badly you guys want it and how much you have loved those moments in the sun for Julius Randle. So, the Knicks have, I think now, such a good culture and such a breadth of gritty, defensive-minded players that I would very much fully expect them to hit like at least 48 wins, if not, more than 50. I see them as one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. So I'd be surprised if they dipped below 44. It would have to be multiple catastrophic injuries for that to be the case. But, between Julius Randle and RJ Barrett, 2 players that I want to love, I just,
Same.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you can probably talk on it more than I can, but they've just failed to meet expectations and the needs of the Knicks and their fans in so many now sequential moments where you've needed them most. Like, I've got to ask you, how do you feel about those guys? Like, we know what we can expect from Jalen Brunson. He's great, but he needs like other top tier talent around him. Like out of RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, who do you expect that to come from more?
So if I was able to just split up basketball's already a 4-quarter game, right? They make it very clear. The fourth quarter also ends up being the most important quarter more often than not. I don't expect fully, but I anticipate RJ Barrett to rise to the occasion in the last 4 or 5 minutes of a game more than I expect or rely on Julius Randle to. Unfortunately, Julius Randle is a better overall basketball player and better at more things than RJ Barrett is currently still. So it's really hard. It's like if I was like for a baseball analogy, it's like RJ Barrett is a good closer, but he's not a starting pitcher. And Julius Randle is a starting pitcher who can't get past the 7th inning. And it's just this constant thing we go through in battle over and over again. Also, you could always tell it was kind of clunky. Most guys that are left-handed, they don't play with other lefties a lot of their life growing up and in their careers and stuff. And we have a starting lineup with 3 left-handed players, and Brunson's a point guard. He starts in the middle. He can kind of get to where he wants. He can call a pick and roll from anybody. He might have the best post game out of anyone under 6'5" in the league in a long time. Barrett and Randle kind of want to do the same thing in the same spots. And Randle is more likely to take a 3. He's more likely to pull up from 3. He's barely more likely to make it. He has like a 1.8 or 2% higher 3-point percentage, which is still below league average. League average is 36%, and they both shoot below 35. So it just hits in the wrong times. And then what they both end up doing, Randle does it more so than Barrett, and like you can see it in his face. He gets RBF, which kind of hurts his case, but they both will mess up offensively, and then you can tell it affects their defensive tenacity and it affects them wanting to chase rebounds and actually get after it for the rest of the game, or at least within that small confines that's happening. So we've said over and over again as Knicks fans, for the most part, at least on Twitter, more of them love RJ Barrett than they love Julius Randle. And I think part of it's just he's younger. He was the draft pick. He's like the homegrown talent, which last I checked, Toronto, Canada is not homegrown, but whatever. That's besides the point. Yeah, but like, so Knicks fans love RJ and they don't like appreciate Randle as much, but Randle's still a better player. But I don't really rely on either one of them when the time comes the most. I want to rely on RJ more when the time matters at the end of the game in the playoffs, because he's less affected negatively by the moment. But Randle, again, the better player. I should expect more out of him, but they both just like fall just short of what we look for time and time again.
So then how do the Knicks go from fun playoff team, which I think they are now, they're very fun, they're a playoff team, to legitimate contender? Is it some sort of internal change with player development or an adjustment in roles and usage, or are you guys poised to make a trade, maybe using some of that top end talent?
The idea, I mean, the easiest way to do it is to make a trade. The idea is to wait for Giannis or Devin Booker or Luka Doncic or Joel Embiid, which I don't think Embiid's a possibility realistically, because I just don't think teams interdivisionally are going to trade with the Knicks. It just doesn't happen. Like James Harden and Ben Simmons is the only recent scenario, and that's because both of them were distressed assets from their own teams. But to go with Luka, Devin Booker, and Giannis, I think the idea is that in a couple of years, if any of them actually become distressed assets or want to leave where they're at, it's like five first round picks and like 3 or 4 of these players. And that's how you would do it that way. The internal thing, and the thing is, what's funny about fandom is that people fall in love with the players that are on the current team, especially when you are a young, plucky team. Like the Knicks never make the playoffs. We all want to blame Tom Thibodeau for most of the situations we have. They're bringing in the Villanova Knicks. Now we have Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo, and they're taking minutes from my guy RJ. They're taking minutes from my guy IQ. What about Grimes? He's the savior. What happened to him being the defensive almighty one that Tibbs wanted? And it's like, internally, the only real scenario is that either Grimes quickly and or RJ become all-stars. At least one of the 3 leaps up to the Brunson Randle level, if not higher. Mitchell Robinson becomes the defensive player of the year instead of a guy that's good at defense and then also misses 25, 30 games like Robert Williams. Like there's a best case scenario where this team could like kind of sneak their way into the finals the way the Heat just did, and then probably get blown out by the Nuggets or the Warriors or the Lakers with this current team. Or they have to be willing. They, as in the front office, probably already is willing because they showed they were with Donovan Mitchell last year. but us as a fan base has to deal with the fact that it's probably going to happen if they are going to actually win a title. RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, Mitchell Robinson, they're trade fodder. They're trade fodder for one of the top 10 players in the league. Like, I'm sorry, if Jason Tatum was available, all three of those guys and 4 first-round picks, adios, see you later. You know what I mean? Like, I want to, at the end of the day, it's shown over and over again, you need a top 7 current NBA player to win a title. There hasn't been a single title team in the last 20 years. I had Drew Hanlon on, Jason Tatum's trainer. He was on, and RJ Barrett's trainer, Joel Embiid's trainer. He was on me almost a month ago now. And he gave me the stat. It's like the last 20 champions all had someone that finished top 2 in MVP voting at some point. Not a single person on this team is like that right now. And no matter how much any of us as a fan base want to fall in love with these young guys, or love Josh Hart's tenacity, or maybe Dante DiVincenzo will shoot 40% from 3 and open stuff up, we don't have that guy. Jalen Brunson at his very, very best is a top 10 offensive player. Top 10 is in the lower half of top 10, and a bad defender, which means you can't be a top 10 player in the NBA. We need a real number 1. And I personally, people hate when I say this, I would be willing to trade Jalen Brunson if it meant I got a top 10 player, because I see where the writing is on the wall. You need someone that's the best of the best to win a title, and we don't have it yet. And to go back to the original answer, unless Barrett, Quickley, or Quentin Grimes becomes some version of either Paul George or Ja Morant or Damian Lillard, we don't have it currently.
That's an unusually healthy outlook for a fan, to be willing to trade their best player to improve. I feel like that's
I'm in the minority, let me tell you.
But yeah, you guys have a real depth of value there. You mentioned them, but I didn't even mention Emmanuel Quickley, and the name has just completely escaped me. Quentin Grimes, apologies. Yeah, who have great value, obviously on the court, but also as trade fodder as well. So there's a lot of maneuverability there for you guys, and I think you guys have the majority of your first round picks going forward as well. So it seems like you guys are poised to, at the very least, have a really fun playoff team again, but also you're ready to strike should one of those stars shake loose. So I'm going to be keeping my eyes on you guys this season. It's going to be fun.
I forgot if it's 19 or 21, but we have 19 or 21 picks in the next 7 years.
Amazing.
They're not all going to, and they're not all going to be on the picks. You know what I mean? You're not going to add 21 new players in the next 7 years to your NBA team.
Exactly.
So, Ben, are you ready for the game that I sent you? This is going to be the last thing we do. Then we'll sign off and get out of here. Thank you again for your time, man. It's been awesome. For me to be up this late at night, my time it's been rough.
Yeah, I appreciate you staying up late to accommodate me. It's rare that I do a pod with an American in the middle of the day here in Australia. So thanks for accommodating me. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
My hours usually either 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. my time, or I literally work overnight, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Wow.
So I'm kind of used to this on it. If I was able to record while I was at work, I would do so many overnight pods. It would be unbelievable.
I bet.
So the game, just for everyone to know that's listening, I told Ben for both of us to make a 10-man rotation out of the Knicks and Celtics rosters. Like, if we conglomerated them into an all-star team, what would the starting lineups be? And Ben, since you are the guest, we're going to do this starting lineup, the second man unit, or the bench unit, and then who closes the game. So I'll let you go first. Who is your starting 5 if the Knicks and Celtics combined into one?
I only answered 2 of the 3 points there in my notes here prior to going live, so I'm going to be winging it on who closes the game. But as far as the starting 5 there for the combined rosters, so Tatum and Brown. I feel like Knicks fans are going to hate me after this. I apologize in advance. Tatum and Brown.
You're a Celtics fan. It's okay.
Tatum and Brown, Porzingis, Rob Williams, and then Jalen Brunson as the point guard.
Wow.
I'll now listen to your criticisms.
That's Ben. What's your X or Twitter handle, just so everyone knows where to yell at you at?
Just to hate me, yeah, at First to the Floor on Twitter and everywhere.
When you look them up, you'll see a clover. It'll be clear as day that it's from Boston, and it won't show any Australian stuff whatsoever. And that's how you know you found it.
We're having fun. We're having fun. That's
all. Dude, I actually almost have the same exact one as you, and I just put Randall over Porzingis. And I want to tell everyone why I have Robert Williams over Mitchell Robinson, because that's probably going to be the main criticism that any Knicks fan has with me as a Knicks fan. Robert Williams already has the All-NBA nod that we all look for Mitchell Robinson to have. And most importantly to me, because this is the part of how you can stay on the floor longer in the playoffs, he shoots almost 20% higher from the free throw line. So every time Mitch Robinson gets a rebound and he's playing the Heat, all of a sudden Eric Spoelstra has Caleb Martin, or it's not Max Strus anymore or Gabe Vincent, but any insert new undrafted player there, hack the crap out of Mitch Robinson, and then he goes 1 for 2 or 0 for 2 at the line, and then you're like, oh man, he got the rebound, but like then they got the ball because he missed the free throws. Robert Williams and Mitch Robinson are almost the same guy, but Robert Williams makes free throws and Mitch Robinson's better at rebounding. I'd rather the free throw shooting and then still assume that Robert Williams can grab me 8 boards a game versus Mitch grabbing me 10. So I apologize to all Knicks fans that I chose Robert Williams over Mitchell Robinson to go with Jalen Brunson, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Julius Randle.
I would love to hear why Julius Randle over Porzingis, as far as like, with the assumption being that everyone in your rotation is healthy at the time of setting that rotation. I feel like you're getting more from Porzingis, a healthy Porzingis, than you are from Randle. So what's the argument there?
So assume that Joe Mazzulla is the coach of this team, right?
Okay.
Who is more likely to be able to run up and down the floor? Who's more likely to grab the rebound and go instead of grab the rebound and have to find somebody? Which I'm picturing this team has a Joe Mazzulla type, a Steve Kerr type, and not a Tom Thibodeau type. Honestly, if Tom Thibodeau was a coach, I probably would say Porzingis, because we're not running and gunning. We're giving the ball to Jalen Brunson, and then we're walking the ball up the floor. Sure. I'd rather Randle be able to grab the rebound and push, which he is much better at than Porzingis is, than I would rather Porzingis' length, because they're both going to chill around the 3-point line and try to drive on open lanes anyway. I'd rather the guy that can actually do this extra talent. And then they're both going to funnel guys to Robert Williams regardless. So I don't necessarily need the better defender. I'd rather the guy that can help me push more.
Sure. No, that's a really good point. I think being able to grab the board and push quickly is huge, especially with people like Jaylen Brown, who are so good in transition. To be able to empower them to excel in that sense of the game is really important. But for Joe Mazzulla and his coaching style, and the one thing more than anything that he's criticized for is jacking way too many threes, and having Porzingis and his, I think 37% from 3 last year, thereabouts. That ability on the floor is huge. Plus, I mentioned his pick and roll drop defense as well. I think he brings a little more than Julius Randle, if I'm being honest. Not to mention Julius Randle shying away from the spotlight at times. I sort of my 2 major criticisms of him. So
with this team, man, he's like the 4th best offensive player, so I don't have to worry about that as much.
We don't need him. We don't need him. Okay, so all right, so we're close to alignment there with our starting 5. So should I give you the second unit now? Because it's a little bit more Knicks friendly, at least from my perspective.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so Emmanuel Quickley, 6-man. Which is a nod to Quickley's season last year compared to Malcolm Brogdon, and also a little bit to Malcolm Brogdon's health status or lack thereof going into this year. So Emmanuel Quickley, Julius Randle is my 7th man, Mitchell Robinson, Derrick White, and RJ Barrett. Just he's another player who I fear shies away from the spotlight. So he's kind of healthily placed there as my 10th man in my rotation. Almost gave it to Quentin Grimes. I think those two are interchangeable at that point on the bench. But that's my back end 5 there, my 5 to 10. What do you think?
So I don't have, you're probably going to think I'm crazy because you literally said Derrick White won the battle and it's why he's a starting point guard. I don't have Derrick White on the team. Mm-hmm. And it's because I have both Emmanuel Quickley and Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench. And I find them being more able to work together, I feel like, because Quickley is like pick and roll. He kind of could learn from Brogdon in a lot of ways of how they play the game. Brogdon is a much better off-ball shooter, shoots like 44% from 3. That's not something Derrick White does. And I think Emmanuel Quickley at 23 years old is going to be better than Derrick White is at 29 years old, or at least get there very quickly, because he's already pretty close now and he's still getting into his prime. Derrick White has reached it. And if I have those 2 guards already, Quickley and Brogdon, I don't need Derrick White for the second unit. I have RJ Barrett. I have, obviously, without Randle, I have Porzingis in there. And then maybe you can help me out, because if we already have Robert Williams on this team and we have Kristaps Porzingis on this team and Julius Randle and Jason Tatum on this team, it sounds like we almost have 2 4s and 2 5s. So I have either Mitchell Robinson or Josh Hart as my 10th man. And I'm thinking that I might lean Josh Hart because he's able to fill in a lot more of the gaps that we have. And unlike with the Knicks having one wing 6'6" or taller than RJ Barrett, this team we've established has like 4 between Brown, Tatum, Barrett, And Randall or Porzingis, if they're playing together, in essence, one of them would be a wing for a short time. But we have at least 3 for sure. So I'm leaning Josh Hart being able to fill in the gap as a smaller wing more so than Mitch being that 4th real big.
Yeah, I gotta lean in on Josh Hart as well. I think he's more of a Swiss Army knife, and at that point on the bench, that far deep into your rotation, you're looking for guys you can bring in situationally for certain matchups and game situations. And I think Josh Hart, he's more compatible with that need than Mitchell Robinson. So I'd agree on the Josh Hart pick as well. It's a good choice.
Word up. So I like that. You didn't have Josh Hart in your 5, right? You didn't do that.
I didn't. And maybe, he's interchangeable for Derrick White there. I cannot overstate how much Derrick White has endeared himself to the Celtics fan base in his time as a Celtic. And, taking all those charges.
If he starts dyeing his hair green, man, it'll be like Marcus Smart never left.
Oh, dude, he shaved it off. He's aerodynamic now. He's got no hair.
Yeah. I feel like that was part of the way he got to the rim easier. He blew people away. Like, they were like, whoa, look at that hair.
That's right. He used to brush them off. But yeah, now he's gone full MJ and given us the Chrome Dome. So we'll see if there's an added element of aerodynamicism coming into the season this year. It'll be great.
Anyone bald, I'm a huge fan of, if you can't tell. So Ben, I'll go first for the closing game since you didn't actually write it down. We might end up having the same 5 based on how this actually looks as a team, and both of us probably wanting to make a death lineup and get rid of the actual big. I have Brunson, Brown, Tatum, Randall, Porzingis as my 5 to close the game.
Brunson, Brown, Tatum, Randall, and Porzingis.
Yeah.
So that, but I feel like I've been crapping on Randall a little bit too much in this podcast. So I gotta, it is a Knicks podcast. So I have to be careful, but
dude, it's okay. A lot of my fans do not like Julius Randle, and they wanted to ship him out for 2 second-round picks within the past year. So it's really not a big of a deal.
Yeah, and I guess to qualify myself for this opinion, I do really like the Knicks. And aside from the Celtics, I can remember watching a lot of Knicks games where I really wanted them to win. I love MSG, I love Mike Breen, I love the product that New York Knicks bring to the television screen. So I do like them as a team. And with that said, Julius Randle's kind of let me down in my desire for the Knicks to be successful beyond that one really good season that he had. So, I might ship out Julius Randle for someone with a little bit more playoff reliability, like Al Horford, for example, who has a better track record of quote unquote, getting it done in clutch moments. So yeah, I think I got to swap out Julius Randle for Al Horford for the closing lineup, for just guys who you just want to have out there to get it done in those dire moments. I got to swap out Randle. I will, tweet me at First to the Floor. I will openly accept the hate for that take, but that's where I'm at.
That's okay. I respect that. I like how Al Horford didn't make your starting lineup, obviously, or your second unit. 11th man off the bench, closing the game. I love that.
Yeah. He's 37. We have to keep him in a cabinet until we need him most.
Right. Last 6 minutes, Al. This is all you need. You need. We'll give you 2 minutes in the second quarter just to get the legs going, and then you got to wait till the 4th. We'll just put you in a hyperbaric chamber. You'll stay fine.
No warm-up needed. He's been warming up his whole life for this. He's ready.
That's true. He blocks his own shot, man. I don't know if you know where he puts his hand on the ball. It just doesn't make sense.
Bizarre.
Oh my God. Ben, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for interrupting the middle of your day for the middle of my evening. This is much appreciated. Feel free to plug any of your stuff. And then again, if anyone wants to send you hate mail or tweets, plug your Twitter first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so hate mail, tweets at First to the Floor on Instagram, on Twitter, TikTok, anywhere there's social media, you can find us there. Google us if you can't find us on those platforms. We're on YouTube at First to the Floor as well. And like I said earlier, we've been doing podcasts for the CLNS Media Network. They have their own YouTube channel as well. So you can find us there for love or for hate. And thank you so much for having us on. This was really fun.
Ben, much appreciated, man. Anytime you want to come on again, we'll plan it for a week, and then I will try to figure out which night I can come on.
Sounds good. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Let's go Knicks. Peace.